Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi Nathan.
Yeah. And I guess a happy calendar new year almost tomorrow. And amazing how time goes by so quickly, isn't it? I mean, 2023, wow. We had a lovely Hanukkah. We had some great family time, and I'm feeling refreshed and excited to move into the new year. So here's a question. Do you guys make New Year's resolutions? Is that something that any of you guys do? It's kind of a common thing, these like New Year's idea. What do we want to do for the new year? Today, we read some interesting passages. Actually, these passages today, the Torah and the Besorah passage specifically, are some of my favorite parts of Scripture. The story of Joseph, the Sermon on the Mount, It's like you can't get any better than this. There's something about these passages. There's something that strikes a chord deep inside me. I tend to cry when I read the Joseph story, when he, sobs and wails, and then he reveals himself. I'm Joseph! I'm blubbering here, and it's just amazing. There's something special in that story. And then the Sermon on the Mount, that was what won my heart to Yeshua so many years ago, was the Sermon on the Mount. So I feel alive when I read these passages, when I enter into these passages. So what is it about these passages that's so gripping? What is it about these that have so much meaning? Joseph, of course, is a story that's engaging. It's a page-turner. Okay, we get that. But the Sermon on the Mount is more of a list of ethical instructions, about adultery and making vows and loving your enemies, these sorts of things. Yet to me, they sort of elicit the same feeling of awe and a feeling of transcendence. And I think people who heard Yeshua speak felt the same way, because after this message on the mountain, what do we hear? They say he spoke with one of authority, and they were amazed at what he had said. There's something here. So what do these two very different passages have in common? What ties them together? I think it's because they're made of the same stuff. They're made of the same substance. They both reflect the midah of integrity. The midah of integrity. Now, in our circles, we talk about the Jewish practice of musar pretty regularly. It's the disciplined practice to help us grow in godly character. There are various different midot. A midot is a soul trait or a heart quality that we learn about and that we practice, like humility or kindness or generosity. And it's a lifetime's work to master any of these. But we grow little bits at a time. And so maybe this year we could make it our goal, like a New Year's resolution of some kind, to grow just a little bit in integrity. The midah of integrity. So let's muse a little bit about this midah of integrity and see where we come out. Now, integrity is often tied to truthfulness. Integrity and truthfulness seem to be the same thing. To have integrity means you tell the truth. A person who lies is a person of little integrity. These statements are true, but actually they're very different qualities. And let's see if we can unpack some of those differences. Integrity is internal strength required to match both internal and external challenges. Integrity is internal strength required to match internal and external challenges. So think about a bridge that has integrity. A bridge has integrity when it holds, and the train will go over it, and it withstands the weather over time. That's a bridge with integrity inside. The integrity of this bridge fails when it develops a crack in its foundations, as if it were to crumble with the weight of the train. Back in 2017, I remember when the structural engineer came into our house and told us that the main frame under a corner of the house was totally rotted away, and that corner had lost integrity. You can't stand on this corner of the house. It might collapse, And that's that word. In Hebrew, the word tom is what we sometimes translate as integrity in the Bible. It has the root tamam, which is translated integrity. It means to complete. It means to be sound. It means upright. It has a connotation of without any blemish, without any blame. So Psalm 25:21 says, "May Tom, integrity and uprightness protect me, because my hope is in the Lord, in you." Proverb 28:6, "Better is a poor man who walks in integrity than a rich man who is crooked in all of his ways." Proverbs 10:9, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." So a person with integrity is a person who is upright, and a person without integrity is someone who is not upright, crooked, someone who is not sound, who's not complete, who isn't whole. This is a person who's not able to withstand pressure, to give in to things like disappointment and anger and other kinds of emotions that totally derail us in life. A person is not able to deal with difficult relationships well is a person who struggles in integrity inside. It isn't just telling a lie or not. It's something deeper inside. A person who crumbles under the pressure to conform to the crowd or to fit in and gives up on their values because of fear or worry or manipulation or that they might be rejected. This is a crack in their integrity. This person who acts against his or her deepest values develops a crack inside the foundation. And it's tied to truth, because when integrity breaks, truth falls away. You create a facade. You create something that isn't real. Now, integrity is inner strength. Integrity is character to continue to walk uprightly, to remain sound and complete when in the face of challenges, to hold fast to our values and to our deepest commitments when pressure comes. That's integrity. Let's look at Joseph. So Joseph has integrity. It's remarkable. His integrity underscores the entire story, and this is what I love about it. Even in the beginning, when Joseph, he comes and he brings a bad report to his father. Now, some people say, well, he was tattling and this and that. I don't think he was necessarily tattling. His brothers were doing the wrong thing. Joseph might have been doing the right thing by coming and saying, listen, there's a problem. Your brothers, my brothers are not doing the right thing. And that's a good thing to do. Tattling assumes he's trying to get his brothers in trouble and that he didn't really care. But maybe it was his integrity, that he just didn't crack. He didn't conform to the pressure to become like his brothers and said, no, I'm not going to become like you. I'm going to go and I'm going to use my words to tell my father. He didn't crack under their fear. Joseph had dreams. Joseph had dreams. God spoke to him in dreams. Now, the Torah makes it very clear that it probably wasn't the best idea for him to tell his brothers about these dreams, that his whole family is going to bow down to him. But I don't think that was a lack of integrity. I think that was foolishness. That was a lack of wisdom. It's a different heart quality. So what happens is his brothers betray him. They throw him into the pit, and then they sell him as a slave to Egypt. Now, Joseph was only 17, and I love this because it means that God speaks to teens, first of all, and also that teens have the ability to have tremendous integrity inside when faced with difficulty. I imagine Joseph experienced significant internal pressure and temptations to become deeply discouraged. Can you imagine? Deeply bitter, resentful. My dreams, so much for God's dreams. I'm as good as dead. See how much he would just give in on all that. But something happened for Joseph. His integrity held. And he acted out of his deepest values, even as a slave. How did he do this? I think that Joseph held on to God's integrity instead of his own integrity. Somehow he trusted in God, who was, in a way, bigger than what he saw, bigger than what he experienced around him. It didn't matter that he was in slavery and away from his father and that his brothers had betrayed him and God's dreams for him would never come true according to what he thought. It didn't matter because God was bigger and God was more important. God's truth was more important. And I think this is an important lesson for all of us when things don't go as planned, when life doesn't turn out the way we expect it to, when we experience horrible things like loss, when we experience betrayal, when we experience abandonment, when we face discouragement in life. We need integrity that is built on God's integrity. We need to see God's character and his involvement in our lives as so much bigger than what's going on around us. We have to look out to 20 years in the future, to the kingdom of heaven, to the things that the Lord is doing. As Joseph rises in stature in Potiphar's house as a slave, he experiences a new kind of pressure all of a sudden. Potiphar's wife, who according to tradition is very, very beautiful, tries to solicit him. And she tries again and again and again and again. And Joseph, he was a young guy. He had a lot of reasons to give in to this temptation for comfort. After all that he had been through, I mean, think about it. Couldn't you just rationalize this? Look, his brothers betrayed him. God betrayed him, it seems like. He could have everything in Potiphar's house. He could have all the power. It was all there for him. But Joseph knew that if he did that, he would really have nothing, because his hope and his rock was not in all of those things. It was in God, in God's principles and God's values in his life, even God's plan that he couldn't see. So his integrity and his bridge held strong, and he paid a price. He was thrown into prison. He was thrown into the pit, as they call it. I mean, imagine it was a horrible place. They didn't have, rights, and things like that for people back then. Anyway, it's almost as if Joseph, his integrity was being measured. He was there for, one Jewish tradition says 12 years, but at least a decade. And his integrity was being measured to see how strong was he? How much integrity did he have? When would he break? Was he strong enough for the task that God had actually called him for? And could you see your own struggles in your life just like that? There's things that God's doing behind the scenes, and you don't know what he's doing and why. Was he strong enough to withstand even greater temptations in life? The temptations of ultimate power and wealth. Think of that. Could Joseph become the one who would defy the age-old saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? It's interesting. If we read the story backwards, think of the character Joseph would need to be in command of all of Egypt and have Egypt's wealth and Egypt's pleasure at his fingertips while remaining to God and his people. I mean, who can do that? His years in prison make sense to us in hindsight. But to Joseph, he was blind to that destiny. And he had to stand only on these invisible promises of God he might think, and many might think, had deserted him a long time ago. That's integrity. When you stand, when you can't see what you're standing on. This is a lesson for us. Integrity means that we stand on the intangibles of life above everything else. The dungeon is called the pit. Joseph's integrity is ultimately what saves him, isn't it, in the pit? He was given charge over the entire prison. I imagine that he would have had plenty of opportunity to escape. He didn't. He had developed a reputation as someone who could be unusually trusted. I wonder if he didn't escape. I mean, think about it. He might have realized that if he did escape, the guards and their families would die. There's a lot going on in there in that experience. And we know the story. Finally, the cupbearer remembers Joseph. After 2 years, his time has come, and he is made ruler of all of Egypt to lead the known world through a coming and severe famine and to save his people, Israel, for the sake of the whole world. I mean, this is a huge calling that he has, and you can understand why he went through all of this. Now, much was required of Joseph, and here's where his integrity really shines. When his brothers come before him, and in a moment of passion, he reveals himself and says, "Guys, I'm Joseph." And he sobs. We read it today. Don't be angry. Don't be afraid. Don't be upset with yourselves at all. It wasn't you who did this. It was God who did this to save our people. Can you imagine that? Even in the face of these temptations to hold resentment and to punish his brothers for their great injustice, or in the face of different temptations to take credit for his own successes, to boast in front of his brothers, he doesn't do that. He looks to God above all else. His brothers were wrong. He could hold them accountable. He had been successful, and he might boast and require that they bow down to him in order to fulfill his dreams. He could have said, "Now's the time, guys. This is what my dream's going to fulfill. Bow down, or I'll throw you in the pit yourself." He didn't do that. He forgot about his dreams. That's integrity. He forgot about what they were because he just trusted God with it. And he was so focused on God's plans that he was able to show them mercy. And he totally forgave his brothers. 13 years. He saw everything they did in the light of God's work and his plan for his own life. Think of the lessons for us in this. Think of how this plays out in our closest relationships and at home. Rather than throw words as rocks and accuse and criticize the people closest to us, around us, what if we ask, how is God using this person in my life to accomplish his purposes in me? When things don't go well, rather than running and hiding and going a different direction, what if you came back in and said, Lord, how are you using this person? How are you using these challenges in my life so that I can grow and so that you can shape me into the person that you want me to be, so that I can live out the calling that you have for me later on? Because who knows? Maybe you'll have much greater temptations, and this is training for that. And if you don't do this well, your bridge will crack. In the end, Joseph's dreams do come true, but in a very different way than he had imagined. Way back in chapter 20, we think his dreams are self-aggrandizing. Joseph will rule over his entire family. The images of Joseph domineering over everyone. But instead, it wasn't that way, was it? Instead, they fall before him in repentance. They fall before him in great need, out of desperation, so that he can forgive and he can save their lives and save their families and their children. Think of all the integrity that it took to get to that point. So in the end, no matter what happens around us and in our lives, the solution is to rely on God's integrity, to rest on his promises, and simply do what's right. Do what's right. Now let's change gears and move into the Sermon on the Mount just for a few moments. We read this beautiful passage. You have heard, don't swear falsely. Keep your vows to the Lord. But I tell you, don't even swear at all. Not by heaven or by earth or by Jerusalem. Don't even swear by your head, because you can't even make one white or black. We know about that, right? But let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything more of this is from the evil one. Now, vows are important in the Bible, and later rabbinic tradition emphasized the importance of keeping your oaths and vows, even as like a central part of the Torah. The context here is that there seems to be corruption within the leadership groups over the temple in the first century. So deception had made its way into the office of the priests. These people would create loopholes, ways that they could make a vow in public but not keep that vow in private. It might be like the adult version of saying something with your fingers crossed. You know how kids have done that my fingers are crossed, so it doesn't count. It's kind of like that. It's very common today, even without the fingers. People feel that the more valuable the thing they swear over, the more integrity there is to their promise. I swear on this. I swear on my life. I swear on my child. I swear on God. That means that your words themselves don't have integrity. And you need to rely on the integrity of this other thing, something else's value. But Yeshua says, no, don't even swear at all. And don't swear by your own head. What can you even do? You can't even make one hair change color. Without integrity at your core, your promises mean nothing. I think that's what he means, because truth has evaporated. And then he jokes with us, it's like you have no power when you don't have integrity, when you don't have this at the core. Now, honesty is important. It's an important trait. Telling the truth is important, but integrity goes beyond honesty. Integrity is the ability not only to say what you mean, but to mean what you say. Yeshua is telling us that our words have power. What we say has power. Remember, God used words to create the entire universe. It's the power of speech that distinguishes the human being from the rest of creation. Our words have power even to create, but only when we follow through with our commitments and our promises and our obligations in life. Our words only have power when we have integrity. So I think that follow-through is the heart of integrity, because it's by regularly following through, our yes is our yes and our no is our no, that we actually develop and cultivate the midah of integrity. So we say, well, okay, we talk about integrity, that's great, but how do you actually do this in your life? How do you cultivate this skill so that it becomes your normal way of life? Over the past few years, I've been encouraged by working with families. I'd taken a training to become a parenting coach, and I've learned a lot in this process. And one of the things that we start with families, with kids or with teens, is to learn how to follow instructions and to complete tasks all the way through. That's like the first thing. Why? Because it teaches integrity. Because nestled inside of this skill is all the muscles that are required to do just about everything difficult in life. It teaches the skill of responsibility. For kids, we define responsibility as doing what needs to be done without being reminded. It teaches how to manage difficult emotions, how to have a conscience that says, hey, I feel uncomfortable inside until this particular task or obligation or thing that I've said I need to do is completed, until I apologize or reconciliation happens. That's your conscience. So Yeshua is teaching us the same thing. He's teaching us how to develop a conscience. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And when you follow through with your word and your promises in the little areas of life, and every day this happens, you teach yourself integrity. You strengthen the same internal muscles, or even neural pathways more realistically, that you'll need to do just about everything difficult in life. So we build integrity when we speak truth. We actually build it. We build it in our brains. And when we let our yes be yes and our no be no in the little things of life. And the same principle is at work here throughout all of the Sermon on the Mount. Let's touch briefly about adultery and lust. It seems like a different passage. Yeshua says, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, anyone who looks lustfully on a woman has committed adultery within their heart. Tough passage to talk about. Yeshua's strong language about adultery, it can seem harsh, it can seem condemning, it can seem hard to understand. But I think Yeshua is teaching us something important about integrity in this whole process. Consider this. Our sages have said in Pirkei Avot, on 3 pillars does the world stand: on justice, on truth, and on peace. If truth should fall, they say, the whole world will fall away. Interesting. Without truth, the world loses its substance. Like a hollow bridge, the world has lost its integrity to be even the world anymore. People lie. We lie because of fear or because of desire. We lie because of the fear of disappointing other people, the fear of rejection, the fear of loss. We make these little lies in life about this or that we think are harmless because we want to protect our reputation. We're afraid of a consequence or afraid of a punishment or something like that. Maybe it's a desire to get something from someone, to experience comfort in some way. But when we lie, our integrity cracks in the deepest way, and we create a facade around us. So instead of a strong bridge, we create the appearance of a strong bridge that really has no substance. It's a bridge that really can't hold the weight of the train at all. It just looks like it can on the outside. This bridge has no truth. Now, a marriage becomes a reality because of the words that are spoken. Consider that. Just as creation comes into existence by the words spoken by God. So the words of fidelity and commitment create a marriage. These words create something beautiful which strengthens the world. With adultery, the integrity of that marriage cracks. And something terribly wrong has happened in the fabric of creation. A bridge has crumbled because it couldn't stand the weight of the train. So when he says, listen, if you get divorced, it makes one commit adultery when they remarry, I don't think that's to condemn people for a broken life or to say that no one should get remarried after divorce. He's telling us that when marriage breaks, so does one of the pillars of the world, truth. This broken truth affects all the other truths around it. So when our bridge fails, our train fails too. And that's when we look to God for mercy, that he might take all the broken pieces around us and build a solid bridge. And mercy comes into the equation here. Our readings close with love your enemies. So what does this have to do with integrity? It's really interesting. Even having enemies in the first place is a tear of the integrity of creation. So when you love your enemies, you partner with God and stand on his integrity and utilize his mercy to repair the crack. You add integrity to the world by doing this, and you add truth to the world, and you make the world more real. The last line we'll close with this is very challenging, isn't it? Did you hear that last line? Therefore be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. And the perfectionists in the room here are like, uh-oh, what do I do with that? Who can be perfect? No one can be perfect. Perfect in Greek is teleos. It's actually very similar to tom in Hebrew. It means to be complete, to be fully mature, to have integrity. So I don't think that Yeshua is saying never make a mistake and be perfect in the sense that a perfectionist might understand it. I think he says, therefore, become a mature person of integrity, even when it's most difficult to do so. So that can be our New Year's resolution, is to become a mature person. Be like Joseph. Do the right thing, even when no one's looking. Do the right thing when you're afraid you'll be rejected. Do the right thing if it means you won't fit in. Do the right thing even when things seem to be going great. Do the right thing even when everything seems to be going wrong. Like Yeshua says at the end of his message, make these words your rock. Build your integrity on God's promises, his values, his life. And then, even if your bridge isn't strong enough to hold the train, God's bridge is strong enough, and his integrity can hold it for you. So with that, a Shabbat Shalom, and a happy calendar New Year. We get lots of New Years in our tradition.